That was the night the Rooftop claimed Wyatt, and our marriage started its slow bleed out onto the streets of Seattle. I met Mason on a ferry to Bainbridge Island, back when the world felt like it could be ours if we just reached far enough. It was one of those crisp autumn mornings, the kind where the Salish sea sparkles like it's hiding diamonds in the depths, and the city skyline recedes like a promise you might keep. I was 28 then, fresh out of a dead-end copywriting gig in Portland, chasing stories for a freelance mag that barely paid the rent on my Capitol Hill walk-up. Mason was 30, already a rising star at KSEA, the local NBC affiliate, with that boyish charm that made viewers lean closer to their screens. He had this laugh, low and rumbling like the ferry's engines, and hair that curled just so at the nape of his neck, begging to be tugged. We collided at the coffee cart on deck, literally. I was juggling a latte and my notebook, scribbling notes on a piece about urban foraging in the Cascades, when his elbow clipped mine. Foam exploded across his crisp button-down, and he cursed under his breath, a string of Pacific Northwest swears that sounded almost poetic. "Shit, sorry. Did I just baptize you in overpriced espresso?" I quipped, grabbing napkins from the counter. He looked up, those green eyes locking on mine, and grinned like he'd been waiting for the spill his whole life. From there, it unraveled fast, the way good love stories do in the movies. We talked for the entire 35-minute crossing, about the best dive bars in Belltown, the ache of missing the wilds of eastern Washington where he'd grown up on a ranch near Spokane, how I'd fled a conservative family in rural Idaho for the anonymity of the city. By the time we docked, he'd asked for my number, and I gave it without a second thought. That night, we met at a hole-in-the-wall in Pioneer Square, the kind with exposed brick and craft IPAs that tasted like pine and regret. He kissed me under the neon sign for Alki Tavern, rain-slicked streets reflecting the glow, and I knew I'd follow him anywhere. Our first year was a montage of stolen moments. Weekend getaways to the San Juans, where we'd rent a cabin and lose ourselves in each other. Lazy Sundays at the Pike Place Market, haggling over salmon and stealing bites of his crab cakes. Nights where he'd read me scripts from his desk, voice dropping low as he narrated hypothetical headlines about us. Local man finds forever in Anchor's arms. We built a life in his Queen and Victorian, the one with the turret window overlooking the Olympics, painting walls sage green and hanging photos of hikes in the enchantments. Mason proposed on New Year's Eve at Gasworks Park, fireworks bursting over Lake Union like stars falling to earth. Ring simple platinum with a single emerald to match his eyes. I said yes before he finished the question. But shadows creep in, even in the brightest reels. Wyatt entered our story 6 months into marriage, not with a bang but a whisper. A name dropped in passing during a late-night call from the station. "Wyatt's covering the desk tonight," Mason said, hanging up with a yawn. I didn't think twice. Why would I? Wyatt Hargrove was the golden boy of Seattle media, 35 and already Emmy-nominated for his investigative pieces on the opioid crisis ripping through the Skid Row motels. Tall, lean, with that surfer's build from his California roots and blonde hair that caught the studio lights like a halo. He and Mason had history, sure, overlapping internships at KSEA a decade back, but it was ancient, or so Mason said. The first crack showed at our anniversary dinner, a rainy April evening at Canlis, the kind of place with views of the Space Needle and prices that made my freelance check sweep. Mason was late, phone buzzing incessantly under the tablecloth. When he finally arrived, tie loosened, eyes a little too bright from whatever cocktail he'd nursed at the bar. He slid into the booth and ordered a double Scotch neat. "Rough day," he muttered, but his smile was there, the one that crinkled his eyes. We toasted to 2 years, clinking glasses over seared scallops, and for a moment, it was us again. But as the night wore on, his phone lit up again, Wyatt's name flashing like a warning flare. Mason silenced it, but not before I caught the text preview. "Missed you in edits. Drinks after." I laughed it off, blaming station drama, but the seed lodged in my gut, sprouting thorns. That night, back home, he made love to me with a desperation I'd only felt in our early days, hands roaming like he was mapping me for the last time. I held him after, tracing the freckles across his shoulders, whispering how much I loved him. He murmured back, but his eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling, chasing shadows I couldn't see. The doubts didn't fester overnight. They simmered, slow as the espresso we'd brew each morning on the French press he'd bought in Port Townsend. By summer, Mason's shifts stretched longer, breaking news, pulling him into the witching hours. I'd wait up, novel open on my lap in the living room armchair, the one with the Afghan his mom knitted during her last chemo round. When he'd stumble in at 2 a.m., reeking of takeout pho and that faint cologne, cedar and salt Wyatt's scent, I'd learn later. I'd feign sleep, listening to him undress in the dark, the zipper of his slacks a accusation in the quiet. One July evening, heat wave gripping the city like a fever dream, I cracked, poking through his jacket pocket for loose change. Old habit from my broke days. I found the receipt. 2 whiskeys at the last word. A speakeasy in Capitol Hill tucked behind a false bookshelf. Timestamp. 1:47 a.m. 3 nights prior. The last word wasn't a station haunt. It was our spot. The one where he'd confessed his fear of never finding someone who saw past the camera to the ranch boy beneath. My hands shook as I pocketed the slip, heart pounding like the bass from the bars below our window. I confronted him over breakfast the next day. Bacon sizzling in the cast-iron skillet. Sun slanting through the kitchen blinds like prison bars. "Who's Wyatt to you, really?" I asked, sliding the receipt across the farm table we'd salvaged from a Fremont estate sale. Mason froze, fork midway to his mouth, eggs dripping yellow onto his plate. For a second, his face crumpled, the mask slipping, revealing the boy who'd lost his dad to a logging accident at 16. The one who'd clawed his way to the anchor desk on sheer will. Then it hardened. "An old friend," he said. Too quick, eyes flicking to his coffee mug. "Jealousy's ugly on you, OL." But jealousy? No, it was the erosion, the way trust crumbles like the bluffs along the Strait of Juan de Fuca. I let it go, or tried to, burying myself in a new assignment. Profiling queer artists in the Central District, their murals blooming defiant on boarded-up storefronts. Mason noticed, brought home tulips from the market. Pink and white, my favorites. And we fucked on the living room rug that night, urgent and reclaiming, his teeth grazing my collarbone as he whispered apologies into my skin. "You're it for me," he breathed, and I believed him, because what else is love but choosing faith over the fracture lines? Wyatt crashed into our orbit fully that fall, invited to a station Halloween bash at the Olympic rooftop, the kind of event with craft cocktails and views that made you forget the rent hike strangling the city. I went as a flannel-clad lumberjack. Ironic nod to Mason's roots. Axe props slung over my shoulder, while he channeled a 1940s newsreel reporter, fedora tilted rakish. Wyatt arrived as James Dean, white tee clinging to his torso, jeans faded just right, that blonde hair tousled like he'd rolled out of bed into legend. He clapped Mason on the back too long, laughed too loud at his jokes, and when his eyes met mine across the crowded lounge, there was a flicker, pity, challenge, that soured the gin in my glass. We danced that night, Mason and I, under strings of Edison bulbs swaying in the breeze off Elliott Bay, his hands on my hips guiding me slow to some indie cover band crooning about Lost Boys. Wyatt watched from the bar, nursing a Manhattan, his gaze a tether pulling Mason away even as we swayed. Later, in the cab home, Mason's head on my shoulder, he slurred, "He's nothing, babe, just noise." But the words tasted hollow, like the aftertaste of too many shots. The unraveling accelerated come winter, solstice shadows lengthening our days into nights of silence. Mason started sleeping on the couch some evenings, claiming back pain from the desk chair. "Ergonomics are a joke," he'd grumble, but I knew better. I'd hear the front door creak at odd hours, footsteps padding soft across the foyer, and once, muffled voices in the hall. His low rumble, Wyatt's lighter timbre, laced with that California drawl. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy spin, imagining their hands brushing in the newsroom green room, the way forbidden touches ignite like dry tinder. By Valentine's, the air in our home hung thick as the marine layer blanketing the sound. He planned a surprise. Dinner at Salumi, those artisan salamis we devoured on our first date, but arrived with lipstick on his collar? No, subtler. A hickey blooming faint purple under his jaw, blamed on a shaving nick gone wrong. I traced it with my thumb over dessert, tiramisu bitter on my tongue, and asked point blank, "Is it him?" Mason's fork clattered. "Oliver, please. You're seeing things." But his eyes, those damn eyes, darted away, seeking escape in the candle flicker. That night, we didn't make love. He rolled over, back to me, the space between us widening like the gap between the ferry and the dock. I slipped out at dawn, drove to Golden Gardens, The beach deserted under slate skies, waves crashing indifferent. Salt stung my cheeks. Tears or spray, I couldn't tell, and I hurled rocks into the surf, each one a what if. What if I'd never boarded that ferry? What if love wasn't a gamble but a guarantee? By noon, resolve hardened. I'd fight for us, dig to the roots like one of those urban foragers stripping bark for tea. Little did I know, the roots ran deeper, tangled in a past Mason had pruned clean from his stories. Spring thawed the ice between us, but only superficially, like the crocuses pushing through mulch in the backyard planters we'd neglected. Mason doubled down on charm, surprise tickets to a Grizzlies game at Climate Pledge Arena, courtside seats where we cheered until hoarse, his arms slung casual over my shoulders, thumb tracing circles that felt like Morse code for sorry. I leaned into it, desperate for the man I'd married, the one who'd vowed in fog and fairy horns at our courthouse wedding. Judge Harlan presiding with a wink and a rainbow flag pinned to her robe. Yet the ghosts lingered. Wyatt's segments aired nightly, his voice of velvet narration over drone shots of wildfires scorching the Olympics, his face filling our flat screen like an intruder. Mason would mute the TV, but not before I'd catch him staring, jaw tight, a hunger there that twisted my gut. One April afternoon, rain pattering the skylight like impatient fingers, I scrolled his phone while he showered. Violation, yes, but trust is a house of cards in a gale. The texts unspooled. Can't stop thinking about last edit session. Your place after? O's out late. Heart emojis from Mason. Fire from Wyatt. My vision blurred. The screen swimming as betrayal bloomed hot in my chest. I confronted him in the steam-wreathed bathroom, towel clutched like a shield, words tumbling jagged. How long, Mason? Since the Halloween party? Before? Water drummed on, drowning his silence, until he shut it off, emerging glistening, vulnerability etched in the droplets tracing his collarbone. He sank to the tub edge, head in hands. It was a mistake, he choked. Wyatt, he's like a drug. Oh well. We hooked up back in college, summers interning. Thought it was buried. But the station threw us together on that housing crisis series, late nights, adrenaline. It reignited. The word scorched, conjuring images of them tangled in the newsroom conference room, blueprints of exposés scattered like confetti from their haste. I ended it, Mason pressed, reaching for my hand. His palm was warm, calloused from boyhood roping steers, and for a foolish second, I let him pull me close. Last week. Swear on the ranch, on everything. We cried then, ugly and intertwined on the bath mat, his sobs muffled against my neck, my fingers combing his wet curls. Forgiveness tasted like rust, but I swallowed it because what is marriage if not choosing the scar over the sever? We tried therapy after that, sessions in a Belltown loft with Dr. Ellis, a soft-spoken dyke with silver braids and a collection of succulents that thrived against all odds. Betrayal rewires the brain, she'd say, her voice steady as the Tibetan bells on her shelf, guiding us through exercises. Eye-gazing for 3 minutes, no words, just the raw exchange of souls. Mason's gaze would soften, gold flecks warming, and I'd glimpse the boy who'd written me letters from J-School at UW, professing love in looping script, but cracks spiderwebbed. He'd cancel sessions for breaking deadlines, arrive home with alibis stitched loose, and once, I found a matchbook from the last word tucked in his wallet, edges frayed like repeated visits. Summer swelled, humid and unrelenting, mirroring the pressure building in our home. I threw myself into work, pitching a series on queer elders in the International District. Stories of internment survivors who'd found love in hidden alleys. Their resilience a balm for my fraying edges. Mason landed a prime slot, co-anchoring the 6 p.m. with Wyatt, their chemistry crackling on air like static before a storm. Viewers ate it up, ratings spiking, but at home it festered. He's professional, Mason insisted over barbecues on our deck. Ribs smoking on the Weber, craft beers sweating in the cooler. I'd nod, force a laugh with our friends. Finn the barista from Analog, his husband Levi with tales from the firehouse. But inside, doubt gnawed like termites in the beams. The high point came in August, a road trip to the Palouse, rolling wheat fields gold under endless blue. A reset we'd promised Dr. Ellis. We drove my old Subaru, top down, wind whipping our hair as Springsteen blasted from the speakers. In Colfax, we picnicked by the river, feet dangling in the current, and Mason opened up, really opened, like the boy on the ferry. Wyatt was escape, he admitted, skipping stones across the water, ripples widening. From the pressure, the spotlight. You're home. We made love in a wheat-choked field that night, stars wheeling overhead. His body arching under mine like a question answered. For 2 days it was us. Laughing at diner pie fights, hiking Snake River canyons, vowing renewal in roadside motels with neon vacancy signs. But reintegration jarred. Back in Seattle, the station demanded more. An investigative doc on the fentanyl flood, Mason and Wyatt paired again. Their late-night shoots bleeding into dawns. I waited up less, burying hurt in midnight runs along the Burke-Gilman Trail, earbuds pumping indie folk about mending broken things. One October evening, fog thick as grief, I arrived home early to find the apartment dim, only the flicker of the TV from the bedroom. Peering through the cracked door, I saw them. Mason asleep on his side, Wyatt curled behind, arm draped possessive over his hip, breath synced in treacherous harmony. The matchbook had lied. The ending was a feint. I backed away, silent as the specter I'd become, and slept on the couch that night, the Afghan scratchy against my skin. Dawn brought confrontation, Wyatt fleeing with mumbled excuses, Mason's face ashen as I laid bare the midnight tableau. It's not what, he started, but I cut him off, voice steel. It's everything. We shattered then, words like shrapnel. His pleas for another chance, my litany of hurts, the ranch boy's accent thickening with tears. By noon, he'd packed a bag for his brothers and Ballard, the door clicking shut like a period on our vows. The separation carved hollows in me, deeper than the tide pools at low tide on Alki Beach, where I'd walk alone now, boots crunching shells, the Olympic mountains mocking with their steadfast peaks. Mason's absence echoed in the apartment. The empty hook by the door for his keys, the cold side of the bed where his warmth used to pool, the French press gathering dust on the counter. I filled days with work, interviewing survivors of the '88 earthquake who'd rebuilt lives from rubble. Their stories of quiet endurance a mirror to my fracturing self. Nights, though, belonged to the what-ifs, replaying like a looped reel. The fairy kiss, the proposal fireworks, the wheat field passion, all undercut by Wyatt's phantom touch. He reached out sporadically. Texts at odd hours. Miss you, laced with emojis that felt frantic, voicemails thick with spoken drawl pleading coffee. A walk, anything. I ignored most, but one rainy Tuesday, weakness won. We met at Zoka in Tangletown, corner booth by the window, steam from our lattes fogging the glass like breath on a grave marker. Mason looked wrecked, dark circles under his eyes, flannel rumpled, the gold in his irises dulled to moss. I fucked up, he said flat out, no preamble, stirring sugar he never took. Wyatt's, his chaos, oh well, pulls me under, makes me forget who I am. With you, I remember. I wanted to hate him, to hurl the betrayal back like those Golden Gardens rocks. But love's a stubborn weed, rooting despite drought. Then end it for real, I said, voice steady as the barista's grind. No half measures. Choose. He nodded, fierce, and we parted with a hug that lingered too long. His cedar sent stirring ghosts. For a week, silence, healed or brewing. Then, the call from Finn, station drama. Wyatt's out. Some blow up with management. Relief flooded, tentative as first light after storm. Reconciliation bloomed fragile, like the Japanese maples in the yard turning crimson. Mason moved back mid-November, boxes unpacked slow, each item a negotiation. His old vinyls on the shelf beside my novels, our coffee ritual revived with tentative smiles. Dr. Ellis beamed in session, assigning gratitude journals. Pages I filled with memories of his laugh lines deepening over bad puns. The way he'd hum Springsteen off-key in the shower. Sex returned hesitant, exploratory. His hands rediscovering my body like a map redrawn. Whispers of sorry, dissolving into moans that bridged the chasm. But Wyatt's shadow loomed, elongated by the holidays. KSA's Christmas party swirled in the Fairmont's Olympic ballroom. Chandeliers dripping light like melting icicles. Colleagues in sequins and suits toasting eggnog futures. Mason stuck to my side, arm looped possessive through mine, introducing me with pride to execs who'd eyed him sideways pre-marriage. Wyatt arrived late, solo, that James Dean edge sharpened to blade. Blonde hair slicked, suit tailored sharp, eyes scanning the room until they locked on us. He approached with a flute of champagne, smile polished as Studio cue cards. Oliver, right? Mason's told me. Everything. The ellipsis hung, loaded, and Mason tensed, fingers tightening on my elbow. We danced polite small talk. Ratings wars, the latest Mariners slump, but undercurrents pulled. Wyatt's gaze lingering on Mason's neck, a flush creeping up his own as laughter bridged too easy. I excused myself for air, stepping onto the veranda where the city sprawled glittering below, Space Needle pulsing red and green. Minutes later, Mason joined, breath fogging in the chill. He's leaving the show, he said, leaning on the balustrade. Transferred to LA Bureau. Clean break. Relief washed, mingled with pity. Wyatt adrift, the golden boy tarnished. We kissed there, snow flurrying soft, tongues tasting of peppermint and promise. Christmas was ours. Tree trimmed with ornaments from his mom's attic, glass-blown apples from her orchard days. Gifts exchanged by firelight. I gave him a leather-bound journal for scripts, embossed with home, and he unwrapped a vintage Rolex, the kind his dad wore ticking through ranch dawns. We hosted Finn and Levi, plates piled with prime rib and Mason's Nana's cranberry relish, laughter bouncing off the turret walls. That night, tangled in sheets scented sage from our anniversary candles, he traced my spine, murmuring, "You're my anchor, OL, always." I believed it, the wound scabbing over because healing's an act of will, like tending bonsai against the wind. Winter deepened, January's gray a canvas for renewal. Mason threw himself into a solo project, a podcast on forgotten queer histories of the Northwest, voices of loggers and fishermen who'd loved in shadows. I'd listen from the kitchen, chopping onions for stew, his voice weaving tales that echoed our own buried aches. Wyatt's departure hit the airwaves subtle. A new co-anchor, perky and straight-laced, and Mason bloomed without the tether, confidence radiating like sun breaks over the sound. But February brought fissures. Late shifts again, podcast edits running long, but alibis frayed when I spotted Wyatt's car, a sleek Tesla, out of place in our neighborhood, parked curbside one dawn, mist cloaking the plates. Heart slamming, I waited in the shadows of the stoop, breath shallow as Arctic air. Mason emerged at 6:15, disheveled, Wyatt trailing, hand on his lower back guiding him down the steps. They paused at the car, foreheads touching brief, a kiss stolen quick as a headline. Then Wyatt drove off toward I-5 South, and Mason turned homeward, spotting me like a deer in headlights. The fight erupted in the foyer, voices rising sharp as gulls over the market. "He's gone tomorrow," Mason pleaded, bag dropping with a thud. Final goodbye, for us. But goodbyes aren't sterile. They're hooks that snag. "You chose him again," I roared, chest heaving, the journal I'd gifted slamming against the wall, pages fluttering like wounded birds. He crumpled then, sliding down the door, sobs racking. I don't know how to stop. We sat there hours, separated by floorboards, until dawn grayed the windows, and I whispered, "Then go, figure it out, but don't come back half." He left that morning, duffel slung over shoulder, the doors click a guillotine on our fragile peace. The apartment echoed vast, a husk of what we'd built. Photos on the mantel mocking with frozen grins, the bed a battlefield of rumpled sheets. I called in sick to my editor, curled fetal under the Afghan, grief crashing in waves. Fury at Mason's weakness, sorrow for Wyatt's pull, a bone-deep ache for the life we'd scripted so carefully. By noon, Dr. Ellis's words looped, "Betrayal's not the end. It's the forge." I rose then, showered hot as penance, and drove to Discovery Park, trails mud-slick under evergreens, lungs burning as I ran until legs buckled, collapsing amid salal berries, tears salting the earth. Days blurred into a numb routine. Freelance deadlines met mechanical, runs lengthening to marathons along the waterfront, evenings nursing IPAs at King's Hardware, where the jukebox spun tales of lost loves in minor keys. Finn checked in, dragging me to queer open mics in Georgetown, stages alive with drag kings spitting fire about survival. "You're stronger than this," he'd say, clinking bottles, his firefighter steadiness a lifeline. But nights alone, the silence screamed. Mason's laugh absent, his scent fading from pillows I'd refused to wash. He surfaced a week in, voicemail trembling. LA's swallowing him whole. "I'm at Finn's. Miss you like air." I deleted it, but replayed in dreams. His green eyes pleading, body arching familiar. Temptation gnawed, but pride held. A shield forged in Idaho winters where vulnerability meant freezing. Instead, I dove deeper into work, expanding the Elder series into a book pitch. Hidden Harvests. Queer legacies unearthed like buried treasure. Interviews with a 78-year-old veteran in West Seattle. His stories of Pearl Harbor foxholes and post-war bars where love hid in code cracked my heart open wider, revealing my own camouflaged wounds. Mid-March, Mason appeared unannounced at a reading in Elliott Bay Books, the crowd thinning under pendant lights, my voice steady reciting passages on resilience. He stood at the back, hands jammed in jeans, face gaunt as the marrow moon outside. Applause faded, and he approached, book clutched like talisman. Heard you on the radio promo. Had to come. We walked post-event, streets slick with cherry blossoms pasting sidewalks, conversation halting, weather, work, the mariner's spring training woes. At my door he paused, breath visible. Can I just hold you? No more. Weakness won again, or maybe mercy. Inside, we sat on the couch, his head on my lap, fingers threading my hair as I read aloud from my drafts, voice weaving stories of men who'd loved through wars and wiretaps. Sleep claimed him there, breath's evening, and I studied the lines etching his face. Crow's feet from squinting at teleprompters, laugh lines I'd traced in passion now shadowed. Pity stirred, softening rage's edges. He was as trapped as I, Wyatt's orbit a black hole sucking light. Morning brought honesty over coffee, mugs steaming on the table, rain tapping Morse. Therapy, I stipulated. Solo first. Unpack the why. He agreed, eyes earnest, and left with a kiss on my forehead. Chaste, brotherly, but electric. Weeks followed in tandem. His sessions with a specialist in Capitol Hill, mine with Dr. Ellis dissecting abandonment scripts from boyhood. We met neutral, coffee shops, parks, rebuilding bricks by brick, conversations delving past surface. His fear of monotony mirroring his dad's ranch drudgery, my terror of invisibility echoing family silences around my coming out. Wyatt's ghost receded, news from LA sparse, a tweet about desert heat, a byline on Hollywood exposés. Mason shared fragments. He's spiraling, chasing stories that chase him. Empathy crept unbidden. The man who'd unraveled us was unraveling, golden facade cracking under spotlights. One April Eve, post-run, Mason waited on the stoop, pizza box warm in his lap. Our favorite from Pagliacci, sausage and fennel. Progress, he said, slicing shares. We ate on the deck, city humming below, and talked dreams deferred. His novel on ranch queers, my book tour fantasies. Laughter returned, tentative, bubbling over a burnt crust joke. Intimacy reignited slow, a spark in May at the Folklife Festival. Stages throbbing with fiddle and drum under blue skies rare as mercy. We wandered hand in hand, sampling salmonberries and bannock, his thumb stroking my knuckles absent. In a quiet glade by the totem poles, he pulled me close, lips brushing ear. I choose you, every dawn. We tumbled home, shedding clothes in the hall, bodies colliding hungry. His mouth mapping scars I'd forgotten, my nails raking his back like claiming territory. After, tangled and sated, he whispered histories. Wyatt as college rebound from a brutal breakup, a flame fanned by proximity, extinguished now by distance and will. Summer hummed harmonious, our rhythm syncing like the fairies hum. Barbecues with Finn and Levi, hikes to Rattlesnake Ledge where vistas stole breath, nights on the roof deck stargazing, his head pillowed on my chest. The book sold, modest advance funding a cabin rental in the Methow Valley, where we canoed the river, his paddle strokes mirroring mine, evenings by fire pits roasting marshmallows sticky sweet. We're mended, he'd say, toasting with local Pinot, and I'd nod, believing because scars, when traced tender, become stories of survival. But autumn winds whispered warnings, leaves skittering like secrets across the lawn. October gale stripped the maples bare, mirroring the rawness returning to our days. Mason's podcast launched to acclaim, episodes on the Lavender Scare's Northwest ripples, guests like a 92-year-old activist from Tacoma sharing tales of McCarthy-era raids on gay bars. He glowed, microphone in hand, but the high mask tremors. Canceled dinners for interviews, Phone angled away during calls. That cedar cologne faint but persistent on collars. I buried unease in book edits. Galleys marked red under desk lamp. But doubt seated, sprouting in quiet moments. Staring at the fridge magnets holding our fairy photo, faded now like vows. The call came November 1st, a Thursday fogged thick as regret. Mason's phone buzzed during our ritual Thai takeout from Bob R. Green curry steaming between us. He glanced, silenced it, but the name seared. Wyatt. Wrong number, he muttered, but eyes betrayed, flicking guilty to his plate. I set down chopsticks, heart-thudding prelude. Answer it. Reluctance etched his face, but he did, voice pitching casual. Hey man, what's up? The tinny reply crackled. Wyatt's drawl. Edged panic. Need to talk. In person. Flying up tomorrow. Mason's jaw tightened. Not a good. But Wyatt cut in, words tumbling urgent, ending with, for old times. Please. He hung up, face ashen, and the dam broke. What the hell, Mason? LA's not far enough. Accusations flew. His promises ash. My trust incinerated anew. He defended frantic. He's crashing. Lost the gig. Bad breakup. Talking reckless. As a friend. But friendship's a thin veil over embers. Friendship doesn't reek of cologne? I snarled, storming to the bedroom, door slamming echo. He followed, pleading through wood. One meeting. Closure. Then gone forever. Exhaustion won. I relented, conditions iron. Public place, full disclosure after. He agreed, kissing my knuckles through the crack. But sleep evaded, sealing a screen replaying betrayals. Wyatt arrived the next eve, landing at Seattle-Tacoma amid downpour. Mason fetching him from baggage claim while I paced the apartment, nerves electric as storm wires. They met at Elliott Bay Public House, neutral ground, our old haunt. Over oysters and IPAs, Mason texting updates. Just listening. He's wrecked. Hours stretched, pub closing, and still no return. Midnight found me at the window, city lights blurring through rain-lashed glass, when headlights swept the drive. Mason emerged alone, Wyatt's silhouette absent, his steps heavy up the stairs. Inside, he collapsed on the couch, scotch poured neat, recounting the night. Wyatt's unraveling. Fired for ethics slip on a celeb scandal. Lover ghosting post coming out. Isolation gnawing like the desert wind. He jumped topics to us, Mason said, voice raw. Said he never stopped loving me, that you were the interloper. Rage flickered, but pity tempered. Mason's too, eyes distant. I told him it's over. You and me, that's the story. They parted at the pub, Wyatt to a motel in Tukwila. Flight south at dawn. Relief mingled bitter. Closure's a blade that cuts both. But the rooftop loomed, inevitable as tide. Saturday, KSEA's fall gala at the Museum of Flight. Black tie under biplane wings. Donors toasting journalism's torch. We attended armored. My tux rented crisp. Mason's tailored sharp. Arm linked defiant. Wyatt crashed it uninvited. Tuxedo rumpled. Eyes wild as he cornered Mason by the Spitfire exhibit. Voices rising over jazz trio strains. I intervened. Hand on Mason's shoulder. Time to go. Wyatt wheeled. Face contorted. Hurt. Booze fueled. You think you fixed him? He's mine, always circling back. Words escalated. Security hovering. Until Wyatt bolted. Coat flapping. Vanishing into the night. Mason chased. Fool that he was. Leaving me amid champagne flutes and whispers. Texts pinged frantic. At the station. He's on the roof. Heart seized. I raced downtown. Wipers slapping frenzy. Streets slick as betrayal. Sirens wailed by arrival. Yellow tape cordoning the plaza. Colleagues clustered shell-shocked under umbrellas. Wyatt's body sprawled on wet pavement. Blonde hair matted dark. That crooked smile erased forever. Mason knelt nearby. Jacket discarded over him like a shroud. Shoulders heaving silent. Paramedics swarmed, but it was done, 20 stories verdict. The aftermath swallowed us. Detectives questioned. Wyatt's note, scrawled on a script page. Can't anchor without my co-star. Found in his desk. Mason identified, voice mechanical. Then crumbled in my arms on the curb. Rain mingling our tears. My fault, he gasped. I pushed too hard. I held him, whispering nonsense. Love's litany, survival's creed. But inside, fractures spidered. Guilt's weight, love's endurance tested. Days hazed. Funeral in L.A., Mason flying solo, returning hollow-eyed, Wyatt's ashes scattered off Malibu per his will. Home, silence reigned heavier than fog, our touches tentative, hands brushing over coffee, but eyes evading, his green gaze dropping to floors, mind chasing shadows. Therapy ramped, Dr. Ellis navigating grief's labyrinth. Guilt's a thief, but compassion reclaims. Mason confessed depths. Wyatt's hold is echo of his own unhealed losses. Dad's death. The ranch sold to developers. Identity bartered for spotlight. I can't look at you, he admitted one session, voice fracturing. See my failure reflected. The man you deserve stares back broken. I absorbed it, the weight settling like ballast. Love, raw as this, demands reckoning, not erasure but excavation. Winter gripped Seattle fierce that year, gales howling off the sound like Wyatt's unspoken pleas, stripping the last leaves from our resolve. Mason withdrew deeper, sleeping in the guest room. Former office, now a cell of stacked boxes and unspoken indictments. Mornings, he'd brew coffee strong, leave my mug steaming on the counter with a post-it. Thinking of you, I'd sip it black, staring at the ferry schedule pinned to the fridge, remembering our collision course. Work anchored me. The book launch at Elliott Bay, packed house of faces familiar and kind, Finn toasting from the front row. To Oliver, who harvests hearts from hard soil. Applause warmed, but Mason's absence chilled. His text post-event a ghost. Proud. Wish I could. Rebuilding meant excavation, as Dr. Ellis prescribed. Letters to the dead, not for sending but soul scouring. I wrote to Wyatt first, fountain pen scratching parchment by desk lamp. Apologies for the hate I'd harbored, acknowledgments of his pains eclipsed by my own. You loved fiercely, even if it fractured. I penned, tears spotting ink. Mason's turn came harder. He emerged from the guest room one sleety dawn, pages trembling in hand, reading aloud by the window. Regrets for the boy he'd left wanting, confessions of using passion as escape from self. I see you now, Oliver. Not as mirror to my messes, but man entire. His voice broke on the last, and I crossed the room, folding him close, our hearts thudding tandem against ribs. Eyes met then, tentative. His green steadying on my blue, no evasion, just the raw vista of us scarred but standing. We talked hours that day, bundled on the couch under the Afghan, unspooling threads. His plan to quit the desk, pivot to the podcast full-time, voice for the voiceless like those elders I'd chronicled. Less spotlight, more shadow work, he said, fingers interlacing mine. I shared book tour nerves, dreams of readings in Portland lofts and NYC queer lit fests, his encouragement a balm. You'll light them up, like you do me. Intimacy returned organic, sparked one February night at the Sydney Theatre. Indie queer play about twin flames flickering out. Mirrors to our blaze and near extinguish. Post-curtain, walking home arm in arm, snow dusting shoulders. He stopped under a street lamp's glow, cupping my face. I choose us, every fractured piece. The kiss ignited slow, deepening to hunger, and by home, we shed coats in the foyer, bodies rediscovering contours. His lips on my throat, my hands in his curls, gasps echoing off sage walls. In bed, it was reclamation. Tender thrusts, whispered names, climax crashing like waves on Whidbey shores, afterglow limbs entwined, breaths sinking to future's rhythm. Spring unfurled gentle, cherry blossoms carpeting the U-District like confetti from mended hearts. We hiked Discovery Park again, this time hand-holding the loop trail, pausing at the lighthouse to watch seals bask on rocks, their barks a chorus of persistence. Mason's podcast gained traction, sponsors from local breweries, guests like a trans fisherman from Astoria sharing nets of narrative. My book toured modest but meaningful. Signings in Spokane where he joined, reading from the ranch chapter I dedicated to him, voice thick with homecoming. Wyatt's memory lingered, not specter but teacher. His note framed on our mantel, a reminder of love's peril and power. We visited the rooftop once, post-closure, station quiet on a Sunday, security waving us up with somber nods. Standing at the edge, wind whipping, Mason scattered wildflower seeds from a pocket, calendula and lupin, Tough bloomers for concrete cracks. For growth, he murmured, arm around me. City sprawling benevolent below. No speeches, just presence. Themes of compassion in the act. Freedom in forgiveness. Identity forged in fires survived. Summer found us road-tripping east again. Subaru packed with tents and coolers. Palouse Hills welcoming like old friends. In a Colfax motel, neon buzzing, we made plans. Adopting a rescue mutt from the shelter. Maybe a kid down the line via surrogacy. Roots deepening in Queen and soil. Our story's not linear, Mason said over diner pie, fork-spearing cherry lattice. But it's ours. Twists, falls, and all. I smiled, believing, because endings aren't finales but ellipses, inviting what's next. Years later, on our 10th ferry anniversary, we stood deckside, lattes in hand, his head on my shoulder as Bainbridge neared. Still choosing, he whispered, and I nodded, heart full as the sea. Love, in the end, is this. Eyes locked unflinching, scars shared as stars, a quiet vow to weather whatever rooftops rise.